The thing is that I know that I got my genes working for me, but I know one thing, I'm not gonna be stressing out about my age process here and start freaking out about it because I know that the stress of that itself is gonna cause me to age more rapidly.
Hello, critical thinkers. Welcome to this new episode of Healthy and Awake podcast. Here we question the conventional, explore the unconventional, and seek truth in health and wellness. I'm your host, Mike Vera, and today we are with a returning guest, Dr. John Catanzaro, who is the founder and CEO of Neo7 Bioscience, which does precision molecular medicine. He is a doctor of naturopathic medicine from Bastyr University, 1995, and he's innovated patient precision immunopeptide cell therapy for advanced cancers, as well as a whole lot more. Doc, welcome to the show. Did I get everything right there?
You got it, Mike. Thank you for having me on again. It's really a privilege to be here with you.
Well, it's great to have you on. And I know today we're tackling a pretty big topic because obviously you do a lot of work in cancer. And it does seem like the state of the world that we're in right now, a lot of people, maybe more than ever, have cancer. And I work with plenty of clients all the time who are asking me questions about treatments and things like that. And I know there's a whole lot on cancer that we could talk about, but if it's okay with you, I thought it might be a good idea to go down a list of 12 commonly searched cancer treatments that people look up and just really get your take on them, if that sounds
Oh,
good.
absolutely. It sounds like fun. Let's do it.
All right, perfect. Well, let's start with a really big one that I'm seeing headlines even on, and that's ivermectin and fenbendazole. I can never say that one right, but
Yeah, that's fenbendazole or mebendazole and ivermectin in combination. I think there's a lot of good, hopeful, repurposed movement there in those drugs. And what we do see in combination strategy is that they are very effective in metastatic migration and cell proliferation. So they can drop down that expression of the cancer and, in some cases, you could see metastases dropping down by a significant percent. Some cases have reported that they've had a complete resolution where it's gone into no evidence of disease and complete tumor remission. But I would say that it's a very good, strategic movement to, the overall cancer strategy. And I find it to be a very positive addition.
does that mean that cancer is possibly driven by parasites and that's just not being really looked at?
Yeah, I mean, there is an element of, foreign microbes controlling certain events in the body, including parasites and, bacterial entities, viral, entities. I mean, these type of drivers are definitely significant because they alter the microbiome, right? I mean, it's like microbiome shifts and the allowance for inflammatory change in the system is like one of the biggest, provoking elements of why these things, why cancer would actually begin to, become more prominent and more aggressive in its movement. And I think that we need to really consider that it's not just the anti-parasitic action, it's really the controlling pathways that these drugs are actually working on too. So not only if there's an organism that needs to be eliminated, of course, these drugs are pretty effective in doing that, but they're also effective at controlling certain type of pathways that are controlling cancer activity. So you have that double action, if you will.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So
Yeah.
there's a potential for parasites to maybe be there, and the ivermectin and fenbendazole. I still don't think I said that right. So that could be alleviating those problems, but it could also, at the same time, be the case that those particular drugs are also operating on some kind of pathways that seem to improve the symptoms of cancer.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like I said a minute ago, I think it's important that most of us realize that the microbiome shifts in the body are really important because we actually have, very important systems in our lymphatics that actually control defenses. We have the mucoid associated lymphoid tissue, the buccal associated lymphoid tissue in the mouth, the gut associated lymphoid tissue in the gut. I mean, we've got all of these mucosal programming tissues that are responsible for defense and are responsible for healthy resilience. And when they're altered, then inflammatory process takes hold, and that's when the risk for cancerous, shifts can occur, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, the next one on the list here is, from what I've read, sometimes used in conjunction with those pharmaceutical approaches we just discussed, and that's methylene blue. I believe sometimes it's used on its own, and I could be messing some of this up, but just from my research, it seems like some people have an understanding of cancer as a mitochondrial dysfunction as opposed to a metabolic dysfunction driving it, which a lot of people believe also. And if it's more mitochondrially driven, then the methylene blue has some kind of effect on the mitochondria, which could potentially help. That's just my understanding. But what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on methylene blue for cancer
Yeah.
treatment?
My thoughts are, it depends on the indication. It depends on the type of cancer that we're seeing. Methylene blue is it's a very interesting agent because it's, it really is it's a dye, of course, as most of us know it is. But the thing is that it has a mitochondrial affinity. And it is true that a lot of the cancers go through what we call a, mitophagy, where there's an excessive amount of loss of mitochondria in the cells. And in cancer cells particularly, there is actually a programming issue that occurs to where the mitochondria sends out very faulty type signals with regards to its control and being able to keep the energetics of the cell continuous. So you wind up having different systems like the VDAC system and the complex 5 that's controlled by the mitochondria. You've got the inner and outer membrane potentials that are regulating this and controlling ATP management, which the cell goes through all of this activity to supply the energetics to keep that resilience of the cell and keep it intact, right? So methylene blue is like a resuscitator, and it also help and it also, crosses the blood-brain barrier too. So it's effective for neuronal mitochondrial activity too. So very important in being able to put it strategically into the plan. Not every single cancer would benefit from it, but I would say the majority of them would at the right time. So you strategically place it in. I usually say you can't do everything at once. You have to really triage your plan and create an intelligent strategy up front so that you can incorporate some of these things in a cyclical basis, and it usually is a lot more effective that way.
Well, maybe that's a perfect segue into the next one on the list, which is peptides, because I know you're obviously doing a lot of work in that. And from our previous discussion, you mentioned how it was very precise, this idea of precision medicine, where it's not just, hey, let's give you some drug that we're giving to a bunch of other people and hope for the best. It's really, I think you even said, using AI and all kinds of testing to gather as much info as possible so that using peptides and I believe some other therapies as well, you can make a hyper precise treatment approach for someone based on not only the info that you gathered, but also based on their specific cancer, which brings us to peptides. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, when you're talking about like personalized engineering and peptides, you're looking at everything that's going to be pointing in the direction of knowing what the body is signaling. So what is the signal characteristics of what's going on a cellular basis? So when we do these peptides, we're looking at, through blood and urine and tumor tissue, what the molecular expression is and where the faulty communication parts are. Like, in other words, there's high resistance in cancer. And we, in our pipeline, which is an augmented hybrid intelligence, utilize a very sophisticated way of precisely mapping, modeling, ranking, and then engineering output for those particular resistant targets in the person's own molecular expression. So in other words, it's an N of one engineering to the person. We're not modeling it to the disease. we know the hallmark expressions of the disease, so we're very much in tune to that. But we're more importantly, we're looking at the patient's or the person's ability to see where their compatibility, susceptibility, and adaptability is, so that we can help to prime their system to be a lot more responsive to any faulty signal targets that are not working appropriately for corrective action, basically. So we develop a corrective action to those targets specifically to the patient, so they're matched and engineered and matched to the patient. Very, very complex process, but very personalized and precision.
Yeah, and I remember from hearing some of what you said last time, it really seemed to me as the future of medicine. Even though I know you're doing it right now, it just seems like that's kind of the way it will continue to evolve, and it makes me hopeful that it takes this individualistic approach as opposed to the collectivist approach. It just makes
Yes.
more sense. And if I'm not mistaken, you've also been doing some work on cancer that people may have gotten from the COVID vaccine. I
Mhm.
know in previous episodes, we've talked about turbo cancer, SV40, and seriously, all kinds of
Yes.
other ways that the COVID vaccine could potentially contribute to cancer from Dr. Jack Cruz, Dr. Peter McCullough. I even think yourself mentioned some of that last time.
Yes.
Is that something that peptides could potentially help with?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been looking at this very closely with the University of North Texas in collaboration with them we developed a system called the Revis system, which is actually a surveillance control system that predicts genetic instability. So in other words, we get to see in patient data sets what the mRNA vaccine has done to their ability to keep regular housekeeping in their genetic systems, right? And we see a tremendous altercation of the person's own ability to keep what they call differential expression in a normal fashion, which means to keep everything. Good housekeeping requires that you have stable transcription and translation, regardless of, the hits that you may take from the outside, the environmental hits. But it seems like the mRNA spike protein from the synthetic SARS-CoV-2 virus, which was an engineered virus, and then from the mRNA vaccine, which is a nucleotide segment that has actually created a significant amount of post-transcriptional related stress on human systems. And we get to see that with dysregulated tumor suppressors, dysregulated cell cycling proteins, dysregulated immune enhancing proteins. Like in other words, the proteins that are responsible for initiating immune defense against a cancerous cell. All of these different things, we get to see these program shifts that are not favorable shifts, right? So what we've done too is we've done an amazing amount of work to create what we call a mitigation and a signal correction strategy to allow for correction in the system to return back to a good, favorable transcription translation type of process. And the thing is that finding where the individual's faulty targets are in that process of related to the spike and the spike elements, we call them spike elements contaminants. SV40 is a contaminant. It's a plasmid. That's a very bad plasmid to be finding in in the human structure. You shouldn't be seeing any of that in the human structure at all, right? Human system should not contain any of that. We even see segments of 12S and 12S subunits, which are a mitochondrial subunit, which you're not supposed to be seeing those type of fragments in normal expressive data of the person. You're not supposed to be seeing any of those things. We see globins, we see spiked element pieces, we see these different things that are now shifting into the cell and creating a lot of what we call rogue aberrancy that is terrible. I mean, it's like it creates a no off switch scenario, which means the post transcriptional stress is replicated by every cell of the body, right? And that's the alarming part. So
Well, given that the Trump administration seems to be all on board with more mRNA vaccines, I suspect you'll be helping a lot more people in the future with those sorts of problems, for better or for worse.
yes,
But
right.
the next one on the list here that people often look up for cancer is high dose IV vitamin C. Any thoughts?
Well, you would be really a fan of Linus Pauling. Linus Pauling, of course, has won Nobel Prizes. And of course, but he should have got the prize for the DNA. Of course, James Watson said that, James Watson said that he wasn't always the smartest person in the room. It was always Linus Pauling that was. A whole crowd of people around him, nobody around James Watson, who got the DNA, who got the Nobel Prize, one of the Nobel Prize winners for DNA. But but the thing about it is that vitamin C, I can't say enough for vitamin C, but vitamin C has to be properly placed into the strategic plan. I think that, anybody that is suffering with cancer or any type of chronic disease should be considering vitamin C as a regular type of nutrient that is coming in intravenously. And I think that, I say moderate doses of vitamin C, not to go way too high on the dosing, because there are some people, some practitioners believe you got to really orthodose it, which means you go on really, really high. Orthomolecular dosing means you go on really high on the dosing. I say that moderate dosing of vitamin C is very effective, and you could do it. You don't have to do it, you know, as frequent. You could be doing it in a cyclical fashion and still have the same very positive results from it, right? So yes, I'm a fan of vitamin C as an integration for chronic illness and cancer, most definitely.
What if someone maybe all they have at their disposal are the supplements, the capsules? Would that have a comparable effect?
Yeah, it does. I mean, the better form of C to use, honestly, is what a form called ascorbyl palmitate. Ascorbyl palmitate is a fat soluble C that stays in the system longer, and it has a little bit more of a potent action, and you don't have to take as much. If you do the esterified vitamin C's, you got to take a little bit more of that. It stays in the system less longer, and it's a short acting vitamin C. And usually, this ascorbic acids are usually limited in how well they do the job in the system. So a lot of people say it doesn't matter, but it really does matter on the form of vitamin C that you take, right? So like a ascorbyl palmitate, you probably want to take about, 3,000 milligrams at least minimal a day. You can go up to 5,000 a day. That's really sufficient enough. If you want to really boost it, you're dealing with cancer, you got to go up to maybe around 2 grams a day of it, you know? And the same thing for esterified C. A lot of people will use if they use powders, they'll use like a full heaping teaspoon and they'll mix it in something and take it that way. But, I think that it is effective orally, and it all depends upon the GI tract integrity too. So if you have a lot of leaky gut, you may not have the best benefit of vitamin C, right? So,
Which I would imagine could be the case for people who take the very conventional route, who maybe are taking a ton of pharmaceutical drugs with their cancer treatment. I'm just guessing. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that could compromise the integrity of the gut lining.
oh, it can, because the thing is that healing the gut is a very essential part of making sure, like, if you can continue be flooding the system and the GI tract with nutrients, and when the gut environment is extremely leaky, you have leaky guts, activity, or what we call a high intestinal permeability, then you're really not doing yourself any justice. You got to really work on healing the gut by, getting the right balance of pre and probiotics. There's a lot of great probiotics out there that allow for a gut lining repair. There's a lot of nutrients that are really particular in gut lining repair as well. So working on that is essential, because the more supplements you put into the system, and you already have a lot of things passing through the gut that shouldn't be, into the bloodstream and into the tissues, you're going to create more toxic reactions, and you don't want that. So heal the gut first, primarily. And then vitamin C can be very advantageous in healing the guts, but not if you're flooding the system with it, because then you're creating a burden on the, gut environment that's not helping it. It's actually creating a lot more burden on the tissue itself, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I would
But I
definitely
would say,
advise. Oh, go
yeah,
ahead.
and here's the other thing. In vitamin C, like, if you're going to do it intravenously, you got to make sure that, there's a there's a test that needs to be done. It's called, G6PD, which is, you want to be checking for this G6PD deficiency, to be sure that, because a lot of the times vitamin C, if you give it in very high amounts, with G6PD, which can alter a metabolic expression. And you got to be careful with that because some people can't tolerate very high doses of vitamin C because of a G6PD deficiency. So those are things you can be easily tested in blood tests for G6PD. Not a hard test to do, but people who want to get real, moderate to high doses of C should be tested for it first in order to see if they have good tolerance.
Yeah, I'm starting to hear that sort of thing more and more now. I had a client tell me that she has to be careful with folic acid because of the MTHFR gene that she has. And so I definitely think people should, of course, if they are ill or they're just thinking of taking supplements or trying out any treatments, of course, talk with your doctor. None of what I'm saying here is a recommendation of any sort or medical advice. But the next one on the list here, people commonly look up as a possible cancer treatment is medicinal mushrooms. There's a whole variety of some that, I mean, there are some bold marketing claims that some can cure cancer. Others say that it can be part of a cancer treatment regimen. What's your take on medicinal
Y-
mushrooms?
Medicinal mushrooms have some strength to them in what create and regulating what they call apoptosis, which is actually a process of cancer cell death. I mean, you can get to see a lot of these medicinal mushrooms, having that effect on anti-cancer cell proliferation and stepped up defenses against, raising T cells up, raising natural killer cells up, and then really addressing some metabolic slowness of the cells themselves, the healthy cells. So some mushrooms actually do have some action on mitochondrial activity too. So it's like yes, I would not probably make a leap in saying that it's a curative for cancer because I get nervous about saying any nutrient or any drug is a total curative for cancer. You're going to probably have some people reporting that, hey, I took this and my cancer is gone, but that may not work the same for everyone, right? Because there's different types of levels of expressions in cancers. That's, some nutrients, could work and some nutrients can feed the problem, just like a drug can create a resistance, a nutrient can create some issues if you're flooding the system with it and you're thinking you're doing good. And one of those things is like soy isoflavones, for instance, with hormone positive type cancers. Not a good idea to be doing that with hormone expressive cancers because, I had patients that were doing this soy drink and they would get it was on a multi-level marketing thing and they just thought it was the greatest thing because everybody else said they were using it for their cancer. Before you know it, all these patients were doing the same thing with using it. And, in our center, we were actually getting higher expressive, metastatic activity on some of these hormone cancers. And we would just get wondering why is this happening? Because we got them on a very strong protocol to really control that. Well, the common denominator was that the soy drinks that they were drinking were feeding hormonal activity that was not favorable for their cancer. So, you got to watch. Good nutrients are good nutrients, but you want to be sure that they're properly balanced, and you're not doing too much of one thing that then creates a burnout effect on the body. And everybody is different. So whenever we get these reports, I'm happy to hear them, but I know not everybody experiences that all the time. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, and everybody that I've talked to has such a different approach. Some people are taking some drugs and not others, and it's just so
Right.
hard to really say, "Hey, this one thing is the answer for everybody," for sure.
Right, right. But they're powerful. They're definitely powerful. And if you put them into the plan, remember when I was saying earlier, it's good to cycle things in and cycle things out. Make sure that it's compatible with your body systems, right? A lot of people do, energetic testing to see if whether or not something is good for them. You see if it's compatible. Some people have actual straight allergies to mushroom products, and they can't do them at all, right? So the thing is, you got to know your body. And if you don't know your body, learn your body. So learn about what is going to, be more in alignment with your body constitution. And then when you are putting good nutritional, strategic, nutrients in your plan, cycle them appropriately. Do not, have them in for long periods of time. Do a triage and cyclical rotation of them, right? And that's a lot more effective for the body, because then the body will then acclimate a lot better and adjust and won't become resistant.
Yeah, that's good to know because I've definitely been guilty of taking certain supplements just every day for sometimes multiple years, and I believe may have started to cause me some problems. So whether it's mushrooms or something else, cycling is a good idea for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
The next one on the list here, people commonly look up for cancer, is a bit different. It's chlorine dioxide. And this one is maybe the most controversial on the list because if you look it up on sites like the FDA, they'll tell you that it's totally crazy and consuming any amount will kill you. While at the same time, I believe this really gained some traction from a guy who started a literal church around this. And I think that's kind of a
Yeah.
loophole to allow him to disperse it. And
Right.
I've seen the videos. I have honestly tried it myself. I did not die. And people say it could potentially help with cancer. Do you have a take on that?
Well, I mean, it is a chloride molecule, right? And if it's like in low type of dosing structures and you're not mega dosing it, it's less likely to become a harmful entity. Yes, there are chloride shifts in cancer cells, and cancer cells can actually then become more vulnerable to that shift in the distribution, and it can be very effective. And again, it's about not doing toxic doses of it. I don't have there's a lot of patients that I know that are doing it, and things like gallium maltolate. That's another one that's been used a lot. Gallium maltolate is a very powerful mineral on the periodic table. And then you use it in smaller amounts for distribution, and it has a very strong anti-cancer effect, similar to, the chloride type molecule you're describing. So I think that, again, you want to be able to be really careful about how you place it in the mix, and don't ever do anything really in very high doses, because that's where toxicity then can actually be a problem. So you wind up killing the cancer cells, but you can also create tissue, just, problems other places, and you don't want to do that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, let's go with one that's, I guess, also controversial for the next one, but in a much different way. And that would be cannabis. A lot of people who receive a cancer diagnosis go for cannabis. Some people who even I know personally say, I would never use cannabis in my life. Then they get some kind of illness and they're almost excited to start smoking cannabis just from the people I've seen. But is there any actual effectiveness to that?
Well, cannabis and some species of cannabis, I have a good friend of mine, his name is Kevin McKernan, who studies this very in depth. And, he and I work together as, colleagues, friends and colleagues in Cortigen Life Sciences. He has a company called Medicinal Genomics. And he would tell you it's a species direct. Like, in other words, there are certain species of cannabis that actually have higher anti-neoplastic activity to them than others. One of the most important things you got to watch out is really pure species that are not laden with fungus and other, contaminants, because that's like one of the biggest things, that things are grown. And if they're not grown in a pure environment, as pure as it could be, then you wind up having them laden with heavy metals, fungus, and other contaminants that then, create more concern for carcinogenesis than they would do for anti-neoplastic activity, anti-carcinogenic activity. So, yes, I believe that cannabis is very effective. Some very strong action in anti-cancer type chemistry for sure. I've studied it quite extensively, and I'm in favor of it, because the endocannabinoid system is pretty powerful across the board, even in like brain cancers as well, right? You could really be looking at the endocannabinoid system, and strategically putting that into the treatment plan, as long as it's from a good pure source, right? And then there are some people who have actually some issues with their cannabinoid system. In other words, it's hyper expressive, or they're very sensitive. And so some people actually can't tolerate it as well as others. So it all depends on the percent of, THC and the formulations, whether or not it has THC at all, or the balance between that. I will leave that up to my buddy Kevin to talk about, because he's got very strong knowledge about it. But the thing is that if you're going to use it in cancer, you got to make sure that it's a tolerable cannabis, it's a pure source cannabis, and it's strategically put into the plan and rotated. That's how you have to do it. Smoking it every day or things like that, not necessarily, I'm not advocating that. You want to be medicinally, when you're looking at it from a medicinal point of view for chronic cancer or chronic illness, you just want to make sure you do it the right way.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought up those caveats there because just there is a lot of research that seems to say, this is very helpful, and I think people sometimes take that and just say, well, that means all cannabis is helpful all the time, which is
Right.
certainly not the case. I think you were hinting at hypermesis syndrome or for the people who can't really handle it very well. There's the heavy
Right.
metals that you mentioned, fungus,
Right.
all these Chinese growing operations are starting in the United States where they're not prioritizing quality. So
That's very true.
especially if someone is sick, opt for quality if that's a path that you choose for your treatment. And I might have to talk to Kevin McKiernan next to try to get him on the show.
Yeah, Kevin would be a great one to talk about that because Kevin has got, man, he's like he's really super genius in this area. And it's like, well, as a scientist in general, I mean, he and I, have been talking about a lot of different things regarding spike and spike related issues. But he's very smart guy. So I think he would be great to have on your show.
Yeah, I've heard good things. The other person who brought him up was Dr. Jack Cruz. So I'm going to take the hint. I'll reach out to him.
Yeah, yeah.
Next one on the list here, I'd imagine most people have not heard of this, but it sometimes does come up in searches when people are looking for cancer treatments, and that is DMSO, which let's see if I can try to pronounce this. Oh, that's not too bad. Dimethyl sulfoxide, which I think used to be very commonly used as a topical treatment for pain and joint
Yeah.
stiffness and maybe a few other things. It's a solvent and it kind of just seemed to have went away even though it was known to be effective for various different applications and sometimes it seems to be used for cancer. Do you know if that's actually true? Do people use it for that?
Yes, I used it in clinical practice for, 25 years intravenously. So DMSO is a very strong solvent and a lot of peptides that are what we call lipid insoluble will actually become more soluble in DMSO because it's a solvent that allows for better solubility,
It's a
mixing. Let's just say that.
solubility. It's a tough yeah.
Solubility. So, yeah, so, the solubility and the mixing. So,
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is that it's important to know that, being a solvent, you don't use high amounts of DMSO. So what we used in intravenous DMSO when we were, using our peptides, we used very small percent DMSO in the IV fluid along with the peptides very effectively. And, DMSO is very sensitive to light. So you have to, make sure that you're covering your IV bags to be sure that they don't have direct light hitting them so that you're preserving the action of DMSO.
And hey,
And
not to
yeah,
interrupt you, but just for clarification, this idea of it being a solvent, just in the context of what you're saying, what exactly does that mean? Because I could be wrong on this, but not exactly a carrier, or maybe it is a carrier, but it kind of helps to get it into the body quicker.
yeah, it's actually based upon the ability for enhancing the absorption of a substance, right? It does have a carrier ability, so it is an effective solvent that allows for better transportation is how I would say it.
Okay.
And that's the reason why we use it because you can be shuttling, peptides in through the system and get it to perfuse into difficult compartments when you use a small amount of DMSO. And the DMSO also has a very strong anti-cancerous effect on the cells themselves, right? And not only that, but DMSO also can traverse the blood-brain barrier too. And like you were saying earlier, the wonderful word solubility is the key. So if you want to be sure that you're not overusing it with a higher percent, you don't need a very high percentage of it. It does absorb through the skin as well, and you got to be careful too because there's certain agents that you would drive through your skin if you're using DMSO, you got to be sure that you're knowing what your combinations are, because you could be driving something toxic into your body that you don't want. So, because it's a very powerful, transdermal absorption molecule. So, organic substance. Yeah.
I bought some to kind of just mess around with it and see if it's all it's cracked up to be. And it made me a little nervous because I didn't really do the research properly before using it. And I remember putting like a plastic spoon in there that had
Yeah.
it had warped and changed colors. And so I would imagine if I had actually touched the spoon or gotten some of the DMSO in my hands, I'd essentially be absorbing plastic into my bloodstream, which
Well,
uh,
good point. I mean, the thing is that the DMSO, as you were mentioning, is a solvent, and that's why I say, it comes in percentages, and you got to know your chemistry, and you got to know how you're using it. You never ever use a very high percent DMSO. Like, for some people are mixing, like, 100% DMSO, and they're applying it to their eyes, and they're saying, "Oh, yeah, I mean, it's really helped with my vision, and it's helping me with." you know various type of things, and different lesions on their face. It does work, but you have to, a little bit goes a long way with DMSO. You don't need very high percentages of that solvent to do the work. It has a small percentage of that. And if you're going to use it on your skin, it's very, very strong in its ability to absorb. And most of the time, you put it on your face, you're going to be tasting it in your mouth. You're gonna be smelling it in your pee.
oh wow.
So that's how fast it works. So you don't want to be using lots of it, because small percentages of it, and don't go crazy. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then if you're gonna put it in your eye, you don't be putting like 100% DMSO in there. You got to dilute that puppy down, and it's got to be a very dilute percentage to where it doesn't sting your eye at all. You have to make sure that it's not just tolerable, but it's safe, and it doesn't create a burning effect on your tissue. So the thing is, very carefully, and make sure you know the agent, because if you don't know the agent, you really going to put yourself in harm's way, because you might use way too much. It'll be toxic for you. So.
Yeah, I mean, my eye is still kind of twitching after the thought of putting that stuff in my eye.
But it's very effective in cancer, I'll tell you. I mean, we have so many people that we worked with that had very, very strong cancers, that weren't, with the peptides, because the peptides are really energized in that solvent base, but it's a very small percentage. And when it's done systemically, it has a very great effect, and it's safely done. So those type of things have to be done under medical supervision by someone that knows what they're doing. And you don't want to be just, reading something online and thinking that you got it. And then you get something and you find that you hurt yourself. Right.
Yeah,
So,
or listening to this episode. I again, I said this earlier. I don't want anyone to say, "Hey, I'm going to mess around with everything on this list on my own." Like, I don't want anyone to hurt themselves or make
right.
themselves worse. Please, do this the right way, responsibly, and with professional medical help.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
This is really because I know a lot of people ask questions about these things, and so hopefully to give them some answers that they can further research on for themselves. Which brings us to the next one on the list. This is maybe a more common one that I see in the alternative cancer therapy treatment approaches, and that's apricot seeds, which I believe has a high concentration of a certain B vitamin that even I think has some legal issues around it, which only makes it even more suspicious if that's true. So what's your take on
Mhm.
apricot seeds?
Well, B17 or pangamic acid, apricot kernels have been out for a long, long time. You probably maybe remember Laetrile, Laetrile was actually the B17 pangamic acid that came from apricot kernels. And the thing is that's been used as an alternative strategy in cancers for a long time. And, honestly, I don't see a lot of toxicity associated with the pangamic acid, or, what we call B17 or Latro, as it used to be called, or apricot kernels. I don't see a lot of toxicity associated with it, but honestly, I don't really see a lot of anti-cancer benefits either. because there were many patients that were using, they did everything. And, like I was saying earlier, it's never about the one thing you do. It's about how strategic you are in doing it and how you cycle it and making sure you put a good hub strategy in there. And I don't believe that B17 would hurt, apricot kernels would hurt, but I really haven't seen them to be really efficacious. And, I looked at studies and there's a lot of controversy over studies as to whether or not they are or not. Now, one of the things I would say is if probably being able to extract the principles or the constituents that have the anti-cancerous effects would be the smart thing to do is like look at the compounds and then even maybe look at structures like because plants and plant-based type medicines have their own peptide structures, by the way. You can actually isolate active principles of these and make them a lot more effective in their ability to be effective in cancer rather than the raw or crude apricot kernels, right? So that's my take on it.
which they seem to have no problem doing with I mean, every pharmaceutical on the market is basically done through that process, and yet they seem to shy away from apricot seeds. I don't know. It just seems awfully unusual.
Yeah, I think that, you got to be looking at it from the standpoint, okay, you know that this is like a non-toxic type therapeutic approach, but a lot of people make claims that it's very strongly anti-cancerous. I would not say that it's very strongly anti-cancerous. I think that it has limited value in the landscape overall. But I do believe that it's something that needs to be studied more because it hasn't been completely studied from a phytochemical point of view. And and I think that it does need to be studied because there's active principles that could be isolated that will be a lot more effective than just the crude product itself, right?
Right, right. So instead of just giving someone a handful of apricot seeds to study what's exactly going on within the apricot seeds so that they
Right.
can kind of extract it and make it into something more useful,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
goes to what I was saying. Like they do that with all kinds of pharmaceuticals, like opium. I had a pharmacist on the show recently, and we were talking about cannabis and opium came up, and he talked about how, opium's this plant and they dig in what's going on in the opium and they extract what
Right.
kills pain the most. And it makes sense what you're saying. If apricot has even a little bit of potential benefit for people who have cancer, why does it seem to be shunned? But that's a little off topic for today. So let's go down the last few on the list here. This one is, I don't know what to make of this for a potential cancer treatment approach. The the big one at the top here is the Rife machine, but I kind of have a few under
Yeah.
the same bullet point because
Right.
when I was researching this, there seems to be a few different kind of waves that people look to. So sound waves for cancer treatment, light waves for cancer treatment. So photobiomodulation, electromagnetic waves, which I believe would be where the Rife machine fits in, if I'm not mistaken. So waves for cancer. What should we think about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I think that there's really a very strong value in electromechanical or therapies, particularly waveform therapies, because of the fact that every cell of the body has a vibrational energy. DNA works at a certain vibrational energy field. A lot of cancers actually behave in a certain type of frequency. And what we get to see is there are studies out there, particularly that are talking about tumor treating fields, for instance, to where you can see glioblastomas now. There's what we call a tumor treating field helmet, and it's a helmet that allows a certain type of pulsation to occur to really inhibit the contact to contact point of glial stemness. So in other words, the glial cells are less likely to build a tumor moiety if they are actually in an electrostatic charged environment. So it creates an inhabitable tumor field because of the constant shifting and pulsing of the electromagnetic pulsing.
Would
And
that
so
be
I
at the transcranial direct stimulation type helmet?
Yeah, it's Optune puts it out, and Optune is a company that's more specific on tumor treating field technology, which I believe these impulses are important, right? So Light therapy, yes. I mean, like peptide therapies work really well with blue light therapy, right? And some red light therapy or alternating spectrum therapy. So, very important to consider light spectrum, electromagnetism, and the physics of it, because remember, we're dealing with the physical, mechanical relationships of what's happening in cancer cells, and not just from a metabolism standpoint, but from a construction standpoint. So, like, there's certain type of scaffolding construction that's going on by shapes and movements and squeezing particles in and various type of things. These are all we call tumor biophysics. And people need to understand that this is a very strongly developing technology right now to understand the tumor microenvironment and why the cancer cells attract to certain areas based on, the principles of physics. So it's a very counterintuitive process. And, you can never assume the same thing to be true all the time with regards to cancer, because it really shocks your brain into a place where I realized that I should never say that it wouldn't do this, because it does do it. It figures out a way to do it. But the body, remember this, the body has a amazing ability to forward and reverse engineer itself. So it has an amazing ability to forward and reverse engineer itself, and it utilizes these different type of principles, these, physics-based principles to do it. So because we are a very complex molecule-driven, if you will, electron-driven environment. And therefore these type of therapeutics are very powerful. They are very powerful.
So, if something like electromagnetic waves can be used to potentially alleviate some of the problems associated with cancer, it does make me wonder about what people refer to as dirty electricity and the conspiracy theories around 5G towers and even Wi Fi and putting your phone in your pocket. That's a whole big conversation, maybe for another day, but it does make you wonder.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Next on the list here, colloidal silver or nano silver, sometimes used as a
Right.
treatment or in conjunction. What are your thoughts?
I like colloidal silver, nano-based type silvers, very antibacterial, antimicrobe, and they also have it also has anti-cancerous activity to it. So again, now remember, it's a heavy metal, so even if you're putting it in a colloid, if you're putting it into a nanostructure, still putting it into your body. And remember, silver, gold, any of the periodic table heavy metals, you're still putting a heavy metal in the body, right? Even though it's silver. So it's not as maybe, toxic in its presence as some other type of heavy metals like mercury, for instance, but it is still on the heavy metal spectrum, right? So when you're using it, you don't use it every day. A lot of people are putting it in their mouth every day. They're putting it on their skin every day. They're ingesting it every day. And do you remember the studies when they were giving like echinacea continuously for colds? They were finding out that people were getting more colds, not at first. They were getting more colds with the people who were actually taking echinacea every single day. They did it, for a long period of time without any breaks. It was actually
Interesting.
creating more suppression on their immune system that was actually enhancing their immune system. Because again, it becomes an agent of toxicity rather than an agent to create a medicinal action. And that's why I say, they came out with a criteria saying, well, with echinacea now, you probably should do like a 3-week on, 3-week off type of a presentation, or just use it as you need to use it during times that you think your immune system is challenged, but still cycle it, right? Well, it's the same thing for these colloidal silvers. Don't take it every single day. It's like I said, it accumulates in the tissues. I don't care how nano it is, it's still accumulating in the tissues, even though it's creating a safe haven for transportation, but it still accumulates. So use it strategically in a cyclical way in small amounts, not in high amounts, right? Not every day.
Or
That's
you might turn blue also.
yeah, yeah. You gotta be looking at it from that standpoint. It's a balance. Same thing with methylene blue. You don't want to be taking methylene blue every single day with you want to be, look, I mean, if you did studies and looked at the methylene blue saturation on tissues, right? I mean, there is a tissue saturation toxicity for everything. I mean, if you looked at it and you did what we call an admin analysis on every agent, even if it's the most medicinal and positive profiled agent, it actually has a saturation toxicity to it if it's done too frequently in too high of a dosing.
Well, let's end on, I think, a perfect one that follows that, because out of everything on the list, I think it has probably the lowest profile for toxicity. And especially, we often focus on things that we should, like more pills we should take, or what
Yeah,
mystery treatment don't I know about that I need to try right now. But I feel
right.
like this next one, lifestyle changes, is often sort of left out of the picture here. So things like exercise, and this might feel anticlimactic after that list, I realize, but I do think it is pretty important to exercise, eating healthy foods, fasting, but for some people, reducing
Yes.
toxic exposure, getting sunlight, avoiding artificial light, especially at night, all those sorts of things. I guess in the grand scheme of things, if someone does have cancer, how impactful could lifestyle changes like that actually be?
Very, very impactful. So the right clean, way of eating, and this is something that my wife and I have been really focusing in on: better clean eating, more exercise. We do Pilates about 5 to 6 days a week. We're former Pilates. We go for walks. We get the morning sun. Try not to get too much overexposure of the sun, but just the right amount of exposure in the morning. Maybe in the later, evening as well, where you actually have the sun going down and it's not as, not as direct on you, but you're still getting the benefit in your eyes and your skin. Exercise, look, the balance exercise is good. We've had a lot of people in, resilience and performance, and there's guys that are very, like, I mean, these are pretty much CrossFit people that are
You
really,
could say meatheads. It's
yeah,
okay.
yeah, right.
Meatheads.
So, I mean, the thing is that if you're looking at it, look, I'm not knocking it, but it's important to have the right exercise regime and the right way of clean eating, minimizing the amount of exposures that you have coming. You're not going to be able to take care of all of it. I guarantee you won't. I mean, even if you went to the farmer's market, they're all homegrown foods. There's traces of different things. You're going to be dropping the index down, the exposure index down quite significantly. And that's going to lower the burden on your body, so that gives your body the ability to become bouncing back and be more resilient and regenerate. So you will do that. There's no doubt about that. But here's the other thing: is don't freak out about everything, because look, if your anti-aging protocols will cause you to age because you are stressing out about the aging process. It's not healthy. And there are a lot of people that are proclaiming that the hundred's the new 30, where I would not make a leap like that. I'm 66 years old. And, I think I come from a pretty good gene pool of, Mediterranean people. And the thing is that I know that I got my genes working for me, but I know one thing: I'm not going to be stressing out about my age process here and start freaking out about it, because I know that the stress of that itself is going to cause me to age more rapidly, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, and look, I don't have any problems with, mental energy or mind movement or whatever the case may be. But I do struggle sometimes with, like, overall body energy. But I'm working to, fine tune those things and just do it. Age gracefully. I mean, it's like, don't stress out about it. Do whatever you can to enhance your body resilience, of course, but don't stress out about the aging. And look, if you're going for the 100 to be the new 30, well, that's an awesome goal. But whether or not that's realistic or not, I would have to say, I'm sorry, I would not make that claim. And I've been in science and medicine for all these years. I mean, the other thing is that I know a lot of people are feeding off of it, and there's just a lot of Instagram stuff going on there. But but the thing is that you just want to take it as an individual journey and enjoy your life. Enjoy your life. and learn to do the things that are going to enhance your resilience without stressing about it. Right. I mean, you look, Mike, you just a very young looking guy. And the thing you want to do is you want to journey through this, enjoy the process, and don't become fanatical about it. Because there are some people, I'll tell you, their energy, when I'm watching them on Instagram, it's like your energy makes me anxious. It's like I
Yeah.
can't watch you. I can't watch you. Just watching you makes me feel like I'm aging. So I'm turning you off.
Yeah. I love the way that you answered that because I set it up very deliberately where when I mentioned lifestyle, I didn't say there's no toxicity risk. I didn't say it was 0. I said it
Right.
probably has the lowest toxicity profile on the list, and you perfectly pointed out things like, well, maybe you can get too much sunlight. Maybe you can exercise too much. Maybe you
Correct.
can, I know people, some clients who come in, they want to start tracking food to help reduce their calories, and then tracking
Right.
just stresses them out
It,
and potentially makes the problem worse. So
true.
such a good
True.
point. And we knocked out all the ones that I had on the list. Anything you feel I left out before we wrap up?
No, I don't. I think you had a very good list there, and we went down the list, and really excited to actually talk about those things because they're very important. And people can look. A lot of those things that are in that list are really good things to consider, right? And the most important thing that I would say is triage and cycle, and don't do it in toxic amounts, right? And make sure you're getting professional, good integrative, functional professional, assistance, because these people that are in the field will actually direct you with more safer strategies. I'm one of those people that are out there in the peptide world, and I'm happy to, to provide that type of information because I'm all about trying to get people to realize that it's about the balance and allowing the body to be on the right vibration of healing so that the body can recover and become more resilient. And believe me, we've been seeing a lot of resistant diseases, including really severe cancers, become totally a thing of the past for these people, where they are completely free of the cancer, and they're living their lives in a very healthy way and in a very balanced way. So thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. So where can people find out more about you? And if they do want to get in touch with you in that professional context, maybe they do need this type of help. Where can they find you?
Yeah, they can just go to the website, neo7bioscience.com. I'm there. I have the Beyond Bio X posting that I do. You've seen that, Mike. I'm on Substack as well. So, I mean, we've got Substack publications and things like that come out, every couple of weeks. And, those are the best ways to get a hold of me.
Well, the links will be in the show notes. And folks, I know as a podcaster, I'm pretty terrible at saying, hey, please share this episode, but please share this episode. This is probably the most important one I've done. I could guess that most people listening to this, if not everyone, knows somebody affected by cancer. And, I really tried to get some answers that might be at least a little bit helpful because I know how tough it can be and how overwhelming and stressful it can be. So hopefully this can help some people out there. But Dr. Catanzaro, thank you again so much for your time and really for your valuable insight. But other than that, folks, stay healthy, stay awake. Oh, I forgot to hit record. I'm just kidding. Sorry. I,
Let
I